Superman is my favorite superhero of all time, by a huge margin. There's a beautiful simplicity to the characters. He's a paragon, the ultimate paragon. This idea of being good is never out of style. Even if the whole world feels like a strange, cold, miserable place. The best Superman stories are whenever he's dealing with some sort of emotional obstacle. The best Superman stories are never ever, you gotta punch Zod. No one's gonna say that. That's stupid. That brings me into Man of Steel. When I first watched it, I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. It was a Superman movie that I've always wanted ever since I was a wee little boy, you know, from the beautiful imagery, the beautiful soundtrack, to me really liking Henry Cavill as Superman. You know, I watched loads of interviews with him and I was like, yes, he's perfect. And I'm like, hell yeah, I can dig this. Yeah! Second viewing is pretty bad, and every single subsequent viewing has been awful, because nothing makes any sense. Take Jor-El's speech, for instance, in the movie. Wow, it's amazing! And then the instant you put more thought into it, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. He goes from being like, what if a child aspired to more than what society had intended?
What if a child dreamed of becoming something other than what society had intended for him or her? What if a child aspired to something greater?
And now I want you to do X, Y, and Z.
You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. They will join you when the sun counts.
That doesn't make any sense. And like, you take away the dramatic music, you take away the beautiful images. It just doesn't make any sense. But I want to love Man of Steel. I really do. You know, if I can't just accept the movie the way it is, I'm gonna have to, you know, do a little thing with it. Stuart Hall, one of my favorite theorists, came up with 3 types of readings that you can have with the text, you know. There's preferred, negotiated, and oppositional. And you know what? I'm tired of having an oppositional reading. I'm gonna go with a negotiated reading now. I wanna see if I can enjoy the movie by imposing my own delight with it.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on his farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O.
Now, I don't hate Zack Snyder. I think he's a beautiful man who makes very beautiful movies, but the man and the movie both are very dumb, seemingly. Okay, so I can see the script right there. So, Man of Steel is a wonderfully cast modern reinterpretation of the Superman character, in which after finding out that Krypton is going to blow up, Jor-El decides to bang his wife the old-fashioned way, because why not?
We have had a child, Zod. Krypton's first natural birth in centuries.
Michael Shannon then gets angry and screams cartoonishly and kills Jor-El with the ironic death of being penetrated. In order to prevent the movie from portraying the iconic moment where Jor-El and Laura-El are holding each other while Krypton blows up around them, with the final blissful hope knowing that their son is leaving Krypton safely, instead the movie takes the improved move by having Superman's mom change into a formal outfit, and then change again into an outfit with more cleavage showing when dying alone by herself, because if your spouse died, your #1 concern should be, what am I gonna wear? Clearly that is an improvement, Zack Snyder. The baby eventually grows up into a 33-year-old hobo who has flashbacks over the slightest of things. Through the flashbacks we find out that the reason why he's an aimless hobo devoid of any sense of motivation in life is because he's adopted by his father, played by Kevin Costner, who is a piece of shit crazy idiot person because he's someone who just stands back and watches his son get bullied constantly, doubts his son's desire to help people.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
Tells his son to wait and keep his power secret until an opportunity should happen.
A choice of whether to stand proud in front of the human race or not.
Only to go back on his word immediately.
Our family's been farming for 5 generations, Clark.
And then in the face of a tornado, he tells people to hide underneath an overpass, which is what you don't want to do because the chances of being hit by any flying objects are, you know, increased by loads. But whatever, this is supposed to be the mad ramblings of a crazy man who misguides people, so I guess totally in character. Kevin Costner then dies by letting the tornado consume him. As a result, Clark eventually grows up into a sad, repressed individual. He then meets the holographic projection of his biological father, in which he asks questions, then gets told what to do, and then does it with no thought or opinion of his own. I want to make a joke about the US military sponsorship for this movie, but Yeah, let's not do that. Clark then flies into outer space in a cool visual, only for Michael Shannon to suddenly message Earth.
Surrender within 24 hours.
After some nonsense, Superman surrenders to the US military because, well, you know, they are the ones paying the bills. Superman is then taken away by Zod, and then despite being able to breathe in outer space, he's affected by Kryptonian atmosphere.
What's happening to him?
He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics. Rejecting our ship's atmospherics. He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics. He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics. He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics.
Superman then learns about Michael Shannon's plan, where he tells him that he's going to terraform Earth. And, you know, even though Hobo Clark was able to maintain a physique that would require an ordinary human to eat about 5,000 calories a day, I think Kryptonians don't really need to eat that much to stay fit. Not to mention they can breathe in outer space, so this means they could probably just terraform anywhere, not just Earth. Superman finds out about this plot hole, escapes, and then saves a soldier because, you know, they are the ones paying the bills. Superman then tells Michael Shannon how to hone his senses and discover all of his powers because, you know, the plot needs him to.
My parents taught me to hone my senses on focus on just what I wanted to see.
The Superman then gets beaten up and dramatically walks out, where soldiers lower their guns because the foundation of trust is being built between humanity and Superman.
This man is not our enemy. Thank you, Colonel.
It's a beautiful image that is semiotically anchored by the Sears logo above the characters, showing that everything is possible with corporate sponsorship. Metropolis is then destroyed when Michael Shannon releases the World Engine. Superman then works with the American military because, you know, they are the ones paying the bills. But whatever, Superman then coughs a bit. Even though he can breathe in outer space, and chooses to commit genocide by destroying the Kryptonian birthing chamber and destroying several buildings. The World Engines are defeated. Jenny, the intern, then lightens the mood with a bit of sarcasm.
He saved us.
Superman fights Michael Shannon. Michael Shannon hits... what? Kicks. Oh, okay. Michael Shannon then kicks an oil truck at Superman. And, you know, since Superman, having been raised by a crazy piece of shit psychopath of a father, jumps over it, allowing it to destroy the entire public parking space behind him, presumably killing loads and loads of scared innocent people hiding in it. And then he just so happens to land in front of a family in this really dumb, like, completely binary situation. Superman then kills Michael Shannon, realizes that he shouldn't kill people in the moment, and realizes that saving people could be a way to stick it to his old piece of shit crazy old man. So he smiles at his grave, knowing he's free from his piece of shit father's oppressive consequentialist values, then meets Lois Lane at the Daily Planet, which was not destroyed when the World Engine was there, which basically means Morpheus was a fool for telling everyone to leave the building.
Alright everybody, we're leaving! We're leaving the building now!
But it's fine, since nobody is suffering from any sort of emotional trauma afterwards, just like in real life disasters, because this movie is supposed to be a realistic telling of what if Superman existed in the real world, with the logic of a cartoon. Alright, so Krypton is basically a biologically determined society. It's very similar to a feudal society in the sense that people are born into their jobs. If you're born to be a farmer, you are going to be a farmer. If you're born to be a soldier, you're going to be a soldier. If you're born into becoming a scientist, you are bred to be a scientist. And that kind of supposedly would be the theme of the movie. It's the idea of existentialism, free will. What determines somebody's destiny? And obviously the movie's poo-pooed on that by contradicting itself. And in a perfect world, if this movie was a genius masterpiece, then the decision would have been to make it so then it's about culture versus biology. Is your destiny determined by what you're born into, or is it the choices that you make? Is it the culture? Superman is a Kryptonian from outer space, but he's born on Earth and he inhabits Earth values and he chooses Earth over his home planet. You know, to make this sound smarter, basically it takes a much more constructivist point of view of nationalism, as opposed to the primordial. And whatever, the point is that that's what the movie should be about. But There's nothing. The movie never proposes any arguments for this. They never show, there's no scene that particularly argues the idea of, hey, you know, on Earth, you can be anything you want. You know, that's not a focal point. It's never characterized in the movie. There's no scene where, you know, you have young Clark Kent standing in the, you know, working on a farm with Jonathan Kent, and Clark Kent is like, you know what, Dad? I think I would love to be a journalist one day. You know, go around, explore the world, meet new people, help people out, listen to their stories. I'd love to do that. And then his dad would be like, well, I'm happy to hear that you're thinking about your future, son, because you can do anything you want, you know. The movie never does that. There are no scenes contrast the Kryptonian society with American society, or, you know, they could easily play with the American dream and being able to choose. If you work hard, you can be anything you want. The movie never ever plays on that, at all. Instead, what the movie seems to do is do the opposite of that with Jonathan Kent, where he seems to have schizophrenia or has a brain fart. He switches gears completely from being like, you're gonna stand proud from the human race, son, to, what's wrong with being a farmer? You're gonna be a farmer forever, son. You're never gonna leave here. Fuck you. And it's like, but considering the fact that this movie is apparently a masterpiece, I'm not even sure if it's considered a masterpiece anymore. Everybody hates the DC movies now, apart from Wonder Woman. But whatever. Apparently this movie was considered being a masterpiece. So this means this lack of contrast, the lack of dichotomy presented between the two different societies must be deliberate, of course. So what if it's the opposite. Instead of saying, look how different between Krypton and humans are, look at the difference between biology versus culture, what if the movie's secretly a critique on the lack of social mobility within America? What if America, and I'm gonna say America because Superman is, as much as I love him, he's an American symbolic icon. In fact, Superman says it himself, I'm as American as it gets, General.
About as American as it gets.
Also, Superman never makes his own choice. He is so underwritten and underdirected, he just kind of scowls a lot.
Go, Lois.
He's constantly submitting to some form of higher authority. He's not really an individual agent, so we can also determine the idea that culture equals biology.
Whoa, just like that?
This whole movie's a black comedy, if you think about it. So the idea of an entire movie being essentially a massive double entendre, where the entire surface reading is a completely ironic one, might sound a bit sort of crazy and zany and, you know, not very likely too. My argument would be a 1997 kids movie called Starship Troopers. One of my favorite films of all time. Essentially the entire film is one massive double entendre. On the surface, if you sympathize and you root for the main characters, you are essentially as dumb as the main characters, you know? On the other hand, if there is that disconnect where you're like, everyone is an idiot, nothing makes any sense, then that's kind of the point. Johnny Rico, the main character Johnny Rico, and his friends are basically vacuous, childlike morons. They all completely fall for this propagandist-driven society, which is run by this very war-driven, violent, fascist, authoritarian, totalitarian world, which, you know, has achieved egalitarianism through the cultural subscription to war, and nothing but war.
This year we explored the failure of democracy, how the social scientists brought our world to the brink of chaos.
And it's like, if you're like, yeah, this is awesome, kill these space bugs, then you are as dumb as the main characters.
They sucked his brains out.
If you're kind of like, this is really like uncomfortably dark, and you start to put some thought into it above more than the surface level, like, wait, so if this war started because the humans started colonizing into bug territory, so that's not really, it's not really the bugs' fault. The movie makes you think by going so far. You know, satire is about making things so ridiculously exaggerated, so like blown out of proportion that you kind of notice the small nuances and stuff.
Then, anger. The only good bug is a dead bug.
My argument is that Man of Steel does the same thing. If Man of Steel is a masterpiece, then that would kind of vindicate all the dumb decisions that were being made.
He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics.
Man of Steel is actually secretly a very, very genius satire on American society.
Yeah, he was the I have.
specifically around the idea of social mobility within capitalism and very much modern capitalism. I mean, think about it. Now, I could be pulling something out of my ass because clearly Zack Snyder isn't the smartest man in the world. And neither is David Goyer. But there's a lot of evidence to sort of point at this. A lot of dumb shit that you can sort of recontextualize into becoming signifiers of this. Take product placement, for example. Now, product placement is fucking obnoxious when they're in big budget movies. That's just, there's no real other way to say it. I mean, sometimes it's so dumb that it works, like in Power Rangers.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on his farm he had a cow.
Like, I'm sorry, there's really very little defense to have with it. Especially when you're making a Superman movie. Because Jesus Christ, if they can make a $100 million Thor movie without product placement, then there's no reason why a $200 million Superman movie needed this much just everywhere. But since this movie is a masterpiece, if you think about it, most of the product placements come from Smallville. Scenes like Superman standing in front of Sears and Pete Ross working at IHOP.
Yeah, he works at the IHOP.
Although the product placement, they're all kind of indicative of some sort of symbolic orders. They are emblematic of capitalism in the most highest and most obvious degrees. The way they're framed and the way it's done, specifically the fact that they're in Smallville, shows that there is some sort of systematic disprivilege. Whatever. Basically, there is social mobility in the sense that you could choose to work at IHOP or Sears within the small town, but you can't very much move up in the world. That's what Smallville is primarily characterized. That's why Jonathan Kent in this version of the universe is a dumb fuck who just wants to keep his son on the farm. It's because when it comes to the idea of social mobility in modern capitalism is ultimately an illusion because of everybody's sort of emotional impotence. It's this new culture of fuckery? Culture of inability? I guess that would work. The movie is basically saying that there is a culture of inability within society.
I just want to do something useful with my life.
So farming, feeding people, that's not useful.
I didn't say that.
Our family's been farming for 5 generations, Clark.
People have the power to choose, unlike Kryptonians, but they can't. And when it comes to the satire, the absurdity of this whole thing comes from the fact that it's played completely straight. There's zero leeway, you know. You look at a Marvel movie, they can go completely absurd. But it works because there is levity to the tone, so you could have the stretch from a government political story that changes from being about Captain America dealing with postmodern values to a silly story about Nazis secretly being jailed.
I'm afraid I have been stalling, Captain.
Like, you can go from genuine seriousness to crazy, like, oh, there are Nazis the whole time, you know. This movie doesn't have that. There are no jokes in the movie, and I think that's part of the point. You know, growing up in the UK, and, you know, like any dumb foreigner, growing up with American cultural products, you know, for the most part, you know, obviously in the UK we have the BBC. We have stuff like, you know, we have Doctor Who, EastEnders. I don't watch EastEnders. America seemed like the best place ever. Like, yeah, woo! It's a land of opportunities, the American dream, woo! Like most things in life, you know, when you grow up, you realize everything is actually quite shite, and everything is really, really dumb in the world. Let me get this right. This is a country where children can't have Kinder eggs, but they can have guns.
Pinky, it's my pink 22 AR-15. And then this one is Pinkalicious, my pink 22 chamber.
Not only that, but they're 16th in terms of education in the world. And now they're planning to get rid of net neutrality. In terms of internet speeds, they're like 9th in the whole world. Like, greatest country my ass. I mean, I don't hate America. And I guess that's what Man of Steel is really about, you know. It's a very complex movie.
He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics.
It's a ironic modernization of the Superman character to try expatiate all of these problems with farce. America is a joke. It's becoming the laughingstock of the world. And Man of Steel is a joke. It's a laughingstock of a film. Don't you get it? And the ending with the absurd. Him killing Zod at the end. I'm convinced at this point that Superman killing Zod is no longer some sort of selfless, like, I can't do it kind of act, because it's so contrived and so, like, weird in terms of pacing that it's pretty clear that that scene is supposed to be farcical, because... Don't do this! Why did they even land there? Like, well, you've killed so many people at this point, Superman. They cut to, like, scared pedestrians looking up, and they're fighting in the air and they're falling and stuff, and you see rubble falling down. The fact that they're looking up, that means that stuff is gonna fall down and kill them. But I'm convinced at this point that Superman killed Zod because he wanted to. It's not because he was like, there was no choice. He wanted to kill Zod, and him screaming at the end is basically some sort of barbaric roar, you know. He's celebrating, and him crying at the end with Lois, you know. He's so happy that he killed his first person, because that's part of the absurdity. Superman killing someone is an absurd image. That's part of the social critique in a black comedy. You're supposed to go like... That's stupid and out of character. I mean, granted, Zack Snyder on a number of moments has not gone out, has tried to justify it as a serious thing. Now, you might be like, that's just you imposing your own reading onto the movie. Like, that's not how it's supposed to be read. Because in that case, anything could be considered as a satire. Anything could be considered political. And you know what? That's the truth, actually. And everything is political. Even when something deliberately says, we're not being political, it's being political by just saying that, you know. And this movie is very, very political, clearly. You've got American soldiers, product placement, Superman. Like, you can't get any more corporate, political, and social at the same time.
How do we know you won't one day act against America's interest?
I grew up in Kansas, General. About as American as it gets.
Now, if you ever want to analyze film, the ending is, ironically enough, a pretty good place to start. Mainly because the ending of a movie or the ending of a story vindicates and anchors the preferred reading of the entire text. Take Truman Show, for example, one of my favorite films. The ending of the movie, after he's getting screwed over with the waters and stuff, and he leaves Sea Haven. The Sea Haven? I think it's called Sea Haven. And he, like, gives a middle finger to Godful, Christoph, that's his name, Christoph, and leaves. We cut to everybody celebrating as the entire, you know, what Marshall McLuhan is referred to as the global village. Loads of fucking people watch, people all across the world in different countries and cultures watching the same thing all at the same time because it's televised. Everybody's happy, like, yay, yay, yay. And then the two security guards is just like, yay, that was great. What else is on? That humorous disregard for the importance of the ending of the character's sort of hero's journey, of his journey as a character for Truman, highlights the specific reading of the film, which is, even though it's great that there are a community of people that loves Truman and see him as a hero and he's great and stuff, he is ultimately just an ephemeral product within this sort of specific commodity fetishized community. People see him as basically the movie is criticizing the media.
Who are you? I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions.
What else is on?
Yeah, let's do what else.
Where's the TV guy?
Man of Steel ends with an absurd ending. Like, the ending is fucking crazy. And I'm not talking about the fight scene. I'm talking about, like, the movie instantly contradicts the rest of the movie. You have Martha Kent being like, your father always wanted you to be something bigger. Clearly he didn't want him to be in anything else. Again, an example of characters being liars in this movie, highlighting the theme of hypocrisy within society. And another thing is that Clark Kent becoming a journalist, just out of nowhere. Like, the movie never shows his interest in journalism. He goes to the Daily Planet and he's introduced to Lois Lane, Perry White, Steve Lombard, that intern. They're all like, yay, cool, let's, you know, here's Clark Kent. Yeah, you know, there's bright happiness. Even though the previous scene of them is accepting death. Not only that, but it basically meant, like, what, they ran out of the Daily Planet in fear for basically no reason. Like, the Daily Planet's not destroyed. And all of these things, you could just say, well, it's just a bad movie. It's just a bad movie. Like, these are all just dumb, inconsistent choices made by a man who doesn't really care about story, but just pretty visuals. Sure, but my argument is that if it's a masterpiece, again, this would mean it's a choice. The choice here is to highlight the absurdity of everything. The whole movie is basically, it's telegraphing, it's black comedy-ness. You're not supposed to be like, yeah, he's Clark Kent, he's Superman, the stages are set, woo! You're supposed to be like, why, they're all happy? This is ridiculous, like, you know, it's a laugh. That's what that's what Man of Steel is. Man of Steel is a hoot.
rejecting our ship's atmospherics.
Oh god, I feel like an idiot. I hope no one heard me actually do that.